This is Stories from the Hackery, a podcast about the students, alumni, and community members that continue to shape Nashville Software School. Nashville Software School is the nation's first nonprofit coding boot camp where a person with aptitude and motivation can gain the skills needed for a career in tech. For more information, visit us at NashvilleSoftwareSchool.com. Welcome to Stories from the Hackery. Today we're talking with two Nashville Software School full-stack software development grads from cohorts that graduated about 5 years apart, but today they work together at Purity Health. So we're going to be chatting with Ripal Patel and Drew Goodman, talking a little bit about software development, but we're going to focus mostly today on how generative AI is sort of changing the game for software development, how they're using generative AI, and we're going to dig into agentic coding tools, which we haven't talked as much, I don't think. We've had one or two podcasts with like Steve Brownlee where we've talked about that some, but we haven't dug into that as much here. But as part of, again, the evolution of generative AI over the last 3 years, this year, the whole coding agent thing has become a real thing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that because both Ripal and Drew went through our new professional development class called Agentic AI for Developers, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But first, let's meet Ripal and Drew. So Ripal, you first. We always ask everybody who's on the show to give their personal elevator pitch. So who's Ripal?
Hi, I'm Ripal, and I was born and raised in India. Back in 2002, I was moved into the USA, and I pursued my master's in healthcare administrations. So from there on, I was working as an administrator in long-term care facility for about 5 years, and then became a mom. So I was full-time mom at home. So I stopped working for a little bit, and while I was with my daughter, in healthcare, we were using some of the softwares to do the documentations for residents and things like that. So I got curious, like how this software works, like clicking buttons, do things, right? So I was wondering what is the magic behind it. And I started researching and start learning a little bit of HTML and CSS. And it got me into it was interesting to me, like you can do things. So, then I started more research and hearing back from my friends and family. I was living in Delaware. So I moved to Nashville. And there were a couple graduates from Nashville Software School. They suggested me that it's a good program that I can learn about the software development and get into the career. So it got me interested, and I applied for it, and I was luckily accepted. And I was part of the Evening Cohort 8 at NSS. And once I graduated, I was landed working with Visualize Health with Fletcher and David. And from there on, we got bought out by a company, so I was carried over there. And then in between, I was working at that company, and then Fletcher reached out to me since they started another new startup company. So I was working back to the same gang, working at Purity Healthcare as a software developer. So here I am.
Great. So yeah, the Fletcher and David you mentioned are the chief product officer, the chief technical officer at Purity Health, who we actually had on our podcast a couple of episodes ago. So we heard a little bit about Purity Health. And in fact, we heard a little bit about you ending up at Purity Health because Fletcher said that when he was being recruited, he told the founder that the first thing he was going to do was reach out and hire you. So yeah, so we've heard a little bit about that story. So you're working as a software developer now with 5 years roughly experience. How over the 5 years, how has your role changed, right? What have you seen in the way of how the work you're doing is changing maybe, or just anything about sort of that arc over the last 5 years of going from fresh out of training into a real job and then to where you are now.
Yeah. So I started out working into a small company, right? So being in a small team was a huge benefit to me when I was hired as a junior developer, because there was a lot of learning for me to do. And being in a small team, we were wearing different hats. So I was able to do developing small feature versus working with the database and engaging into a ETL process. So I was pretty much like doing data validation. When I was at Visualize Health, a majority of my time was involved in doing like data mapping, data validation, and ETL processes, handling those. So I was more, and that was interesting to me because I enjoyed doing database pieces. So, it took me into that interest, and it took me into that they did took me into that direction. And then I was doing a little bit of development on the side too. It wasn't just the database piece. And as I was doing development, things have changed. Now it's been about, I guess, 3 years that we have introduced AI. So I was like super hesitant to use AI at first. I'm like, oh my God, my job is at risk because now there's AI. So not knowing like what AI can do, I've made up that in my mind. Like I don't know what am I gonna do it. So getting exposed like now, when I was introduced that there is a AI class that is getting offered at NSS, I was like, sure, I want to get into it because my knowledge was at the junior developer level. When it came to the AI, I was like, I know nothing about it, right? And when I got into the class, and it was like, okay, it's really not taking my job. It's a tool that will help me to be more productive and do things faster. So that change was like, I made up my mind before hearing things from other people like, what am I going to do? But in reality, it was a different.
Right. Well, we'll talk. Yeah, we'll talk more about the class and sort of what you've learned, and yeah, I think we'll definitely follow up on the why it's not taking our jobs right now. So, but before we do that, let's meet Drew. So Drew Goodman, also works at Purity Health with Ripal, but Drew is a little earlier stage in his career. So, Drew, what's your elevator pitch? Who's Drew Goodman?
So I started at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo as a computer engineering major, and I just ended up going in a different direction. I got into finance and ended up working in wealth management for a while. And when we moved out here to Nashville in 2015, I started working for Dell. And at Dell, I was still in finance. It was an equipment finance and leasing job, basically. So it was a little bit closer to tech. And I started to think about getting back into it. And I just didn't really know how. And as things kind of, this probably was affected by AI also, that Dell started spending more and more on developing their own AI capabilities. And part of that was laying people off. And I had, just like Ripal, I talked to a lot of people who had really good experiences with NSS, and things just kind of came together, and I decided to just take the leap. And I went into the full-time Web Development Cohort. It was Cohort 70. It was React with Python and Django. And, sure enough, when around the time that I finished the cohort, Dell started letting people go, and I was like, oh, so I'm just looking for a job, and ended up getting very lucky in finding Fletcher and Purity Health, and here I am.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things that I know you and I've talked about a little bit, you graduated August, September, somewhere in there last year.
Last summer, last August. Yeah.
Right. So you were starting a job search at a very different point in the job market than Ripal did when back in 2019, when Ripal graduated, we were at one of the peaks of the tech job market. Yeah. By the time 1974, geez, 2024 rolled around, there'd been a couple of years at that point of big layoffs in tech, big slowdowns in hiring. We were starting to see clearly the impact of AI on hiring in tech. Not so much because it was replacing people, but I think because of the uncertainty about what effect is this going to have. Let's try to figure this out. But in any event, slower job market. So I know one of the things you took advantage of right after you graduated was a continuing ed class at NSS. Yeah. You did the advanced SQL class. I think we've talked before that probably helped in your job search.
Definitely got me the job at NSS.
Or Purity Health.
Yes. Yeah. Purity Health or Purity Health.
Yeah. So, and we'll come back around to the whole professional development or continuing ed topic. But Ripal, you mentioned our introduction to Agentic AI for developers class. And I kind of remember hearing the story when you two got into the class. Somebody came to me, I don't remember who it was, saying, "Hey, can we get graduates who are working into this class?" Because our Agentic, just for people listening, our Agentic AI for developers, or Introduction to Agentic AI for Developers, is a brand new professional development or continuing ed class. Ripal and Drew actually went to the first cohort of that class. We're actually a week into the second cohort at this point. But it's part of our ProTech program, which provides free seats in continuing ed classes for NSS grads of all of our programs who are in their job search, what we call seekers. And in this slow job market, those searches are on average quite a bit longer than they ever used to be. So we created this program as a way to give people a way to, one, acquire more skills that would help them be more competitive in the job market, but two, help them keep learning, help them keep using their skills during the job search. And we were lucky enough to get partially funded, with a grant by the Tennessee Department of Community and Economic Development to launch ProTech. And we identified Agentic AI as a big area of change that's obviously having an effect, and also one that even pretty recent graduates at NSS had not gotten exposure to, even though we've been working AI into the curriculum in a couple of waves over the last two years or so. In fact, we just did a podcast with Steve Brownlee talking about how that had all evolved. The agentic coding, not there. It's so new. So, but yeah, somebody came to me and said, "There's this Drew guy who's really enthused about this class and wants to try to get in it and wants to know if we can get in it." And then Fletcher reached out and said, "Hey, is there any way I get a couple people in here?" And so luckily enough, we were able to get you guys in. So thanks to a little initiative on your part, Drew. But part of what we wanted to get some insight into for that class, because we sort of developed with an eye to people who hadn't been out on the job yet. And it's like, so how appropriate is this class as it sits for somebody who is a working developer? So I'm interested in hearing about that among other things. So Ripal, as an experienced developer, and Drew, you as a relatively much more junior developer, when you guys sort of got into the class, I'm curious. I mean, that's a brand new technology, right? So how did you guys feel? Did you sort of feel like it was a level playing field? Yeah, I don't know how much, for example, Ripal, you had played with any of the generative AI stuff ahead of time, or you, Drew, or did it feel like kind of, despite the differences in experience, we're kind of at the same place. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely, like I said, I was using ChatGPT, but as a chat. If I want to know something, I would ask, but as like a chatting bot, right? Not from the agentic AI perspective. I wasn't using that tool. So when I was entered into the class, just like how other developers were, I was feeling the same way. It was new to me and I was there to learn, right? So there were a lot of concepts that I learned from that class, which did help me because at work, we were implementing a project using Agentic AI to develop features and things like that. So this was right at the moment we needed, and it was right at the moment the class we got enrolled into it, luckily. So it was an opportunity for me to elevate my skills and use that skills toward work too. So it definitely helped me in that perspective. And like I said, when I entered into the class, I was feeling like at the junior level.
Did you find, or did you think that your years of experience helped you grasp some of the concepts of the agentic AI tool faster? Or have you had to unlearn any habits or practices now that you're starting to really use agentic AI to develop?
Yeah, I don't think I had to unlearn anything. It's because the technology is always evolving. There's always new things to learn, but that doesn't mean the core gets wiped out. So it still helped me because I had experience when I'm looking through the code, whatever the agentic AI is coding for me, it helped me to move faster. And I'm like, okay, this is not how I wanted. I wanted a different way. So being more concise and clear in your context helped me. And that's the part that I learned in the class, right? Like, yes, AI is a tool out there that can help you, but if you don't use it wisely, it can do wild things. So that was my takeaway from the class. And as a developer, we invest a lot of time in designing and thinking through the process and thinking of the logic before we even start developing, right? So as this AI tool was helping me do all of that and make me more productive. And in the class, there are a lot of concepts that I wasn't aware of, which I learned, like using, having that memory bank that it's having, and then MCP context servers and things like that. So there were still new concepts that I wasn't aware, which I learned during the class.
Yeah. I think one of the things we're observing is that we definitely believe at this point. People say you just pick up one of these things and be productive, but I think the reality is to build professional quality software, production quality software. There's a learning curve. I mean, it's different. So Drew, as someone who is newer to the field, has been working less time, what was it like for you kind of going into the class, going through that learning experience?
So for me, I get really excited about all these new tools that are being thrown at us and trying to find ways to apply them. But it was kind of eye-opening for me in that it's, yes, you can do things faster. Yes, you can use new tools, and it does level the playing field in that way, but it's not a substitute for experience. So yeah, I have all this power now to develop code more quickly, which also gives me the power to screw things up on a much bigger scale. And as someone who is newer and seeing people like Steve and Ripal and Dave and the way that they talk to their AI and keep a leash on it, that's something that I've really had to try to keep in mind to use it correctly. So, for example, the more I talk to it like in pseudocode versus, hey, just do this for me, if I can talk to it in pseudocode, then it not only is it more accurate, but it helps me learn and understand what I'm doing rather than just say, hey, do this for me, and I'm just an operator. So that was one of the things I took away from it.
Okay, this is for both of you. What was the biggest? You've already mentioned a couple of things that were kind of ahas for you, but as you think about it, what was the biggest aha moment you had, or if you've already mentioned it, what was another aha moment for you in the class?
For me, the aha moment was that it's not going to take my job. I think we all, especially with the time I took, the time I went to NSS, it was like you said, the job market was frozen. There was all this uncertainty about these tools. I go into a dying industry, and I learned that It's not going to take our jobs. It's a tool. It's something that we have to use. And you mentioned building production quality software. If you want to be a part of a team and build production quality software, you need to understand how to use it. And it's not going to take your job.
Yeah, I mirror the same thing what Drew just mentioned because, like I said before too, I was thinking that gonna take away our job, but in reality, it was just a tool to help us, right? And that was big. Like when I started using it, it made it a huge difference how productive I can be, and how I can complete the task pretty faster versus me doing on my own. So there was that hesitant before I had it, but after using it, I was like, all right, this is going to make my job easier. It's not taking my job away, and it's making me more productive in that sense.
How do you feel how do you feel now that you've had a chance to be back on the job for a little while and use these tools? And again, this one's for both of you. How do you think it's making you more productive? How is it changing how your time gets allocated, right? I mean, developers, we spend a certain amount of time coding, but there's lots of other parts of the job of building and delivering software, right? So there's sort of, you mentioned the thinking we do in advance, the planning, the design, there's coding, there's testing, there's, again, depending on how a team's organized, there's DevOps stuff and deployment stuff and whatever. Have you noticed yet how it changes how you spend your time? Maybe if you look across a week or something, the productivity's coming from this, but I still have to spend lots of time on that. Sort of how's that sort of mix of task times changed? Because I'm always curious about where do you think the productivity's coming from?
Yeah, as far as like time, my more time gets involved into like reviewing the code that AI write, right? Yes, I can give a prompt and context that I wanted to develop the feature into. It can write the code, but is it the right code that I wanted or the way I would have written it, right? So when it comes to the reviewing the code, that's where I'm spending more time on it versus like writing myself. So I think as far as being productive go, the code can be written very faster, right? That can be done by AI, and that's how it can make my job productive. But then when I'm doing prompt next time, I learn like, all right, I should be more clear and more concise. This is the pieces that I can add, like adding more guardrails, right? Where, all right, this is how I wanted the project to be. This is how the instructions that I need to give it to before it starts, whether writing API or front-end code. So that's setting those guardrails help, and also writing more tests. Sometimes as a human, we don't think about those edge cases that, I can ask AI to tell me within this feature, what can be the edge cases that a user might do. And in that sense, it also helped me to be more productive, where it can do a lot of thinking process too, where I wouldn't think about it.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, like in how I spend my time, I think what it's allowed me to do is, I know you hear stories about people spending 5 hours trying to find a typo. And as someone who is a junior developer and someone who is newer, I see people like Ripal and Dave and Steve who have like an advanced system knowledge, and just it almost feels like magic the way they understand how everything is working together and how they integrate all these tools. And so for me, it gives me a little more time to try to look at things and understand, find where's the semicolon that's why I want this compile. So it gives me more time, I think, to become a more valuable developer.
Yeah, there's this whole, or at least, yeah, right. Don't we all? Yeah, there's this whole layer of stupid mistakes, for lack of a better word, just spelling stuff wrong or chasing the semicolon or forgetting that I needed 4 parens there to close that, not 3. So, yeah. Yeah.
There are still plenty of stupid mistakes that can be made, and I've made
Oh, yeah.
several of them, but it does take away some of them.
Yeah, I mean, even as experienced developer, mistakes are never stupid. It's done, but it does take a lot of time to find it, and that's where our time gets more taken away. Where like you're trying to
Yeah.
figure out, all right, I was supposed to write this lowercase, and at one place I did it lowercase, one place I did it uppercase. Now it's not working.
Now it's, why?
Yeah.
Right. I don't miss those days. Okay. So, well, Steve Brownlee, who's was your lead instructor for the Agentic AI class, threw me a couple of questions that he was curious about hearing your answers to now that you've had the class. So one he was curious about was of the kind of mental skills that you've developed since you started your journey into becoming a software developer. Do you find are particularly helpful when you're working with an agentic AI tool, with an LLM?
As far as I think one of the biggest mental skills is I started working as a junior developer, and then when I'm assigned to a task, I would try to break it down into smaller steps. I think that has helped me when it came to the agentic AI, right? That breaking those bigger tasks into smaller goals that can be achievable in a more concise way. So I think that was my biggest thing that helped me, and being more, I have already mentioned, like being more precise in your communication with AI too, and having exactly provide the context that you would wanted it to work on. So that was biggest skill that helped me.
Yeah. What's your thought on that, Drew?
Yeah, I the last thing that Ripal said is it kind of was my takeaway, and the way I try to approach it is just be very specific, and instead of asking it to do something, give it instructions, and that's where I've had the most success with it.
So again, so you've both talked about being very specific, very precise. Yeah, which I hear when I talk with like some of my friends in the industry who've been doing this for a while. That's one of the things that I've heard them talk about a number of times. And the need to really wrestle with the fact that one of the big things some people have talked about is, oh, well, English is going to be our new programming language because that's what we say to the LLM. But the problem is spoken language, whether it's English or whatever, is very ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
And
yes,
we're used to the person we're communicating with filling in the blanks, right?
Yeah.
That LLM
Can't understand.
it can't fill in the blanks, or you don't want it to fill in the blanks because it goes off into la la land someplace.
Yes, it does.
So I think that point about really precise communication, and Ripal, your point about breaking things down into smaller pieces, that helps with the precise communication, I would think.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Because I'm not trying to describe the whole application.
Right.
I'm talking about one function, so it feels to me like those things kind of go together really well. So, okay. One of the first thing we do now in the boot camps with generative AI is really early in the boot camp. It's like second week, I think now, or very early. Probably right after we confuse the heck out of people with GitHub, is start teaching them how to use the LLM as a learning tool, as sort of like a learning assistant, right? In much the same way, Ripal, when you came through, and ever since we started, we tried to help people develop better search methods and use tools like Stack Overflow or become effective in Google searching. So we've always had that, hey, refer to the internet. If somebody's already solved this problem, you don't have to beat your head on it.
Yeah.
The LLMs sort of take that way up to another level. So, but how compared to doing Google searches or Bing searches or whoever searches. Got to give equal time to the other search engines. How have you found it's different to work with an LLM to get that assistance? I know, Ripal, you even mentioned at the beginning that that's how you sort of dipped your toe in the water with these things, is just asking questions. So is that skill different? Is your approach different with that than when we were just searching the internet? Which we can't really do today without AI getting in the middle of it anyways. So
That's
go
true.
ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, like you mentioned before, when we are stuck at the problem, we were looking at the Stack Overflow and things like that, where you were going through, sometimes you don't get the exact answer you wanted, even through the Stack Overflow, and you kind of keep on searching till you find the right answers. With the AI, it's a little bit easier. I have found it a little bit easier because if I'm telling it something like, all right, can you explain in this function what it's doing? Can you walk me through step by step, right? That process is much easier than going through the Stack Overflow and finding what you don't know, right? So definitely, like, AI has changed that piece, and it can tell you something, and even though you don't know, you can keep on chatting through it and learn till you like get it. I think that's the piece that has changed, and that AI can help us better when it comes to learning, for sure, versus going through the Google search and searching through different sites to just learn one single concept of what that JavaScript function is doing.
Yeah, I think now it's easy to arrive at a solution before you understand how you got there.
Mm-hmm.
So the part of the skill in using it is taking the time to like Ripal said, break it down into steps and make sure you understand how you got there. That's something that I try to be conscious of. Okay. I don't think it was that way before. I don't think Stack Overflow would start writing commands in your terminal and all of a sudden you have,
No. You had to, you were waiting, looking, as Ripal said, you were waiting, looking for things, trying to ignore the sarcastic and whatever answers that people gave to
the
things.
Comments.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, guys. All right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about how now, back on the job, how are we using AI on the job since the Agentic AI class? Because we heard some comments from Fletcher and David that since you guys have come back, you've been able to have a big impact on the rest of the team's use of Agentic AI. So I'm curious. So just kind of open-ended, how are you guys using agents on the job? And can you share any sort of practical, real-world examples of how you're using these tools in kind of day-to-day development work? Because, I mean, just for context for people listening again, Purity Health is doing basically greenfield development of a brand new application, coming up on an initial release of that. So, but in that context, kind of how are you guys using it? Can you give us any examples of how you're getting leverage from these tools?
As far as for me, the new software that we are building, we were using new tech stack, and it was new to both of us. And we were like, all right, that means we had to learn the stack first before we were start using AI. But I think AI helped us, even though the tech stack was new. AI helped us to still continue in writing code and being more productive and continue building features and get the project moving along. So I think in that manner, it was plus for both of us, I think, I would say. Right, Drew?
Yes, for sure. And with it being new, I think one of the challenges that I've had is having the instructions and the guardrails set up so that Ripal and I are working on different pieces of the same project and having some type of protocol, because it's going to do some things on its own. We can't look at every single line of code. So, how do our components look? Where do we? So that type of thing has been a challenge.
Yeah, the learning a new tech stack, that's a great example of, and again, using it as a learning aid and as well as the generate some code, generate some tests thing. But why are you doing this? Well, because your new tech stack requires that we do it this way. Okay, that's a great example. Something I'm kind of I'm curious about, but I don't think I've ever asked anybody is up until the last few months when the agents really kind of started to prove themselves. The first 2 or 3 years of all of this, we were either generating code out of just a chat, Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, build me a lump of code to do this. Or we were using things like GitHub Copilot, which I think you guys use, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is more of that sort of autocomplete, right? Little bites of stuff. Now that you're using Agentic AI, how much are you still doing in sort of what I'll call autocomplete mode with something with like GitHub Copilot, whatever? And how much are you doing in sort of the agentic mode?
I would say 80%. We've been using agentic mode to build the features and things like that.
Oh, so you're using, that's right. I hadn't asked you what agentic tool you're using. So you're using agentic mode in GitHub Copilot for your agent.
Yes.
So you're kind of staying in GitHub Copilot as your IDE, if you will. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So what do you find? Where does sort of the autocomplete mode come in? Right. Where do you kind of feel that is the more helpful mode versus trying to get the agent to do what you're doing?
For me, it's something's not working or I want to understand it and I want to put my hands on it. It's much easier to look at it line by line and here comes the drop down and all your different options, and that helps me understand it. Whereas the agentic is just fast and it helps me build it. So
Yep. Yeah. In that sense, I use, especially when it comes to design and planning, I definitely use ask mode because, what I'm thinking when I'm planning, I want to hear from AI too, like, what LLM thinks that, what the process should be for planning and designing. So I do use that a lot, that too. But when I'm ready to build the feature, I switch it to the agentic mode, and I'm like, here you go ahead and build it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's the third option is the ask. Like because you don't want it to start doing. I'm terrified when it's in agent mode and I don't know it. Like, it can cause some problems.
Yeah.
Get a little runaway train action going on there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, even like sometimes in a cases where I use ask mode more often too, it's like, all right, it write the code, right? And now it thought that it did it the way feature should work. And when I test it, it's not doing it. So I'm like, all right, I'm switching it to the ask mode and I'm asking why it's not doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of playing between both modes, depending on what I'm doing in the task. So I quite a bit use both of them.
Okay. All right. But so definitely feels like there's a very distinct evolution to your workflow that's happened since you've started to use the agentic tool. So, which is another one of those things where there's a learning curve. Changing your workflow is sometimes one of the hardest things to do. You build these habits up and it's like, So,
I was at that place. So I felt that I was like, when I started working at Purity Health and with such a little team, I was the developer under Dave and Fletcher. So that's about it. That was the team. So when he started,
that's what you need, two bosses, right?
Yes. When he mentioned to me, like, start using these AI tools that can help you. And I was like, I'm so used to doing things the way I was doing it, and now I have to switch it to the AI. I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm ready for it because I didn't know how to use the tool. So, that hesitation does come.
Okay. Well,
it feels like you have to make the change though to keep up though, because there's just how can you keep up with it? Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of you mentioned, I think it was Ripple, I think it was you talked about the guardrails put in place. And that's
Hmm.
something that when we spoke with David and Fletcher, David, I think, talked a little bit about guardrails in place or around the AI. Um, I'm curious what, to the extent you can describe them, kind of what are some of the guardrails and how are they helping you be more effective to have those in place?
Yeah. So, for example, guardrails can be the piece of instructions, right? Because there are multiple developers working on the same project, if I'm writing a prompt to the AI to write a piece of code, it's going to write completely different way versus how Drew would give a prompt and write a code, right? So it's a different way it can do things. And having those guardrails in place, we can say, all right, follow these instructions when you're writing this code. So when it's doing it, it's doing same for me and it's doing same for Drew. So we are not wonking up on code when it comes to the way it writes. So definitely having more detailed instructions. We've been putting those in place when it comes to writing the API endpoints or doing front end or write a front end component and pieces, things like that. So having those guardrails in place, it can follow those instructions, whether it doesn't matter which developer is giving the context to AI.
Yeah. Okay. So
It's like a
some of the guardrails are basically they're parts of the prompt. They're either
yeah. It's like a README for the AI. Like it's actually
Hmm.
putting your
yeah,
protocols and conventions on paper,
Yep.
like if you will. So
yeah, yeah, and having those accessible by the AI as part of its constraints. Okay.
and
Yeah.
I'm like paranoid about it. I've gotten to the point where when I start a set, please reread please go back over the instruction files before we start. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a couple of people I've talk about changing workflows have also talked about beefing up some of the checks sort of in their CI/CD pipeline when they're checking new stuff in, building a new version, things like
Hmm.
that, like ensure that the CI/CD pipeline runs the whole test suite, making sure,
Yeah.
which weren't things that they were doing as routinely. Are you guys doing any of those kinds of things?
Yeah, yeah. We do also have guardrails in GitHub. So whenever we pushed up any PRs, it makes sure that it runs the whole suite of tests completely successful. Or whenever you push a PR, they have to have a single test for that feature that you develop. So those kind of guardrails we have in place, or like changes to the package manager,
Yes.
things like that. So we definitely have those guardrails in place too for GitHub.
All right, great. One thing I'm curious about, one of the things we talk about at NSS is part of the orientation, right, is the importance of learning how to learn, right? And that we really try to emphasize that that's an important skill to learn. I'm curious, when we've got a complex new technology like this that's moving so fast, it's changing so fast,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Was there anything about kind of the learning experience at NSS? That boot camp moves pretty fast. Now,
Oh,
Ripple,
yeah.
you went through it in the evening, so we
It
make it
was.
take twice as long that way,
Yeah.
which may or may not be a good thing. I don't know, but maybe it is. But how did that the learning to learn mentality, the idea that we're entering into an apprenticeship that just never ends, there's constant learning, that mindset have you found that to be sort of at all helpful or help prepare you for this pace of change? Because the changes that have been coming down the last couple of years around generative AI and software development are certainly the most profound stuff we've dealt with, certainly since the internet and all the complete wave of new technologies there. But, I think a lot of us feel this is even more profound in some respects. So curious about just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that NSS definitely built me in that set mode. Like, this is not it. You're always going to be learn. That's how the technology is, right? Because it's always changing, and you have to keep up yourself with it. So, I think the great part that helped me at NSS is they put you in that like environment, like you are working for a company, right? They set up that teamwork, and how you're gonna work in the real world too. That environment definitely got me ready for my career. So when I was out there, I'm like, I know what the flow will look like, right? I know how to work with the
Uh,
team, all that. So it definitely helped me in that manner. But yeah, if I think back in 2018, that was a quite a bit long time ago. But NSS definitely prepared me for my job and what I will be exposed to.
And for me, like that's like the learning how to learn, like that mentality, you, that's the skill you have to have. And that's why I
Mhm.
love working in software is it's always changing. You're always going to have new challenges. You're always going to have new cool things coming out that you have to figure out how to use. And that's exactly why like this career has me so engaged.
so, Ripple, given now that you've had the experience of kind of going from, I'm an experienced developer, there's this new thing, oh my God, it might take my job, to, oh, good, it's not going to take my job, but it is making me more productive, right?
Yeah.
What do you say, or what would you say to another experienced developer who might be hesitant or skeptical about embracing these tools, and somebody who's kind of resisting leaning into that learning curve for this new stuff?
Yeah, I think these tools are there to help us, right? So I would say never afraid, just use it. And as you start using it, you will realize that I was wrong about being hesitant to use those tools. So those tools are out there to make our job easy. And I think we shouldn't be, which I was in the beginning hesitant about it too. But as I started using those tools, I learned that I was wrong about it, and it definitely helped me. Then AI was my friend, not my job taker.
So, Drew, sort of the same question, but maybe speaking more to juniors, right? So, any advice for them as they start, as they start learning how to do this stuff, use these tools?
I'd say just use it like any other tool. If you completely rely on it and you're brand new, you're going to be out of your depth pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Like any tool, you have to use it. I don't want to say responsibly, but use it the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, so any other things before we get you with our exit questions? Any other things I should have asked you about either the class or learning these tools or using these tools effectively?
Yeah. I mean, it was honored to be in the AI class. So I really appreciate you guys for giving me an opportunity to be part of that class because that definitely helped me elevate my skills.
I want to thank you for setting all this stuff up. And I might not have good advice for using the AI tools, but for someone who's going to NSS, I would really say stay close to NSS, stay involved. There's a community out there that wants to help you, and you can always come back and keep learning. And
Mhm.
I really love that about NSS. So thank you for that.
I'm glad we can do what we do. And, this,
Yeah,
this ability to offer this ProTech series of continuing ed classes has been fantastic to be able to do that. So, all right. Well, I had two things on the way out. In terms of staying up with generative AI and how our work is changing, I always like to ask people if there's any resources that you have found particularly valuable to help you keep up with generative AI, agentic coding, those kinds of things. Newsletter, a blog, some specific YouTube channel, whatever. Any resources that you would recommend to people?
for me, some of the meetups are really good. I've been to the data meetup is really good. Just staying in touch with people from NSS and meeting people out there and checking in with them to find out what tools they're using at their company. So I guess just go out there and pursue your interests, and don't be afraid to meet people that are doing things that you're interested in doing.
Well, I think that's great advice
Yeah.
for everybody about anything, right? Is be out in the community, meet people, talk to people. Now, you said data meetup. You talking about data nerds or?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, they have free food and free beer. It's at the
That sounds like
what
data
is
nerds.
That's yeah. I've been to that a couple of times. That's a fantastic one for good people. And I think the gentleman that teaches the data class, he was giving a speech on DuckDB and some of the stuff here.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Who teaches the new data engineering program.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's right. I remember a month or two ago, he did a DuckDB thing, which is really cool. DuckDB is very cool. But anyways, so what about any resources, Ripal, that you've used or that you'd recommend?
I do use depending on what topic I'm learning, I do use YouTube and then Udemy and then Free Code Camp to help me keep up with the pace and continue learning.
Yeah, Free Code Camp. Yeah, that's interesting because I always think of that as it's a beginner thing, right? But at this point, there's so much stuff out there on so many topics, some of which are topics that you could easily be 5 years in your career before you ever had a need to learn about. Right. So that's a great suggestion, and it's right in the name. The price is right. It's free. So.
Free, exactly.
All right. Well, all right. So last question. We always ask everybody on the way out. So ask everybody what their technology guilty pleasure is. So, and I'll let whoever wants to go first go first.
I still play video games. I have some side projects I like to work on, but I wouldn't say that that's a guilty pleasure. I got into soccer and I play this video game by myself. I was going to say with my sons, but that'd be a lie. By myself. So, but it's just how connected it is now. How it's yeah. So I play a soccer video game. Does that count?
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. We've had more than a couple people say some sort of gaming, some sort of video gaming is kind of their tech guilty pleasure. Yeah. So what about you, Ripal?
For me, social media is the big one. I have started following YouTube shorts and things like that for new recipes. I've been trying different dishes and plus gluten-free. So when it turns out to be as expected, it is a pleasure. It's a guilty.
I saw somebody say cooking is just debugging food.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to use that one in the future. So, all right. Well, on that note, Ripal, Drew, thank you both very much for coming on, chatting with us about Agentic AI, about the class, about how you guys are using it and taking advantage of it. It's just always great to have grads on and sort of check in on what's going on in their careers, hear what they've been learning, those kinds of things. And it's even better when they're working together on the same stuff. So, very cool. So thank you both for making the time to come and talk with us today. One other thing on our way out, the Agentic AI class that we have been talking about right now is being offered through ProTech for free to people, NSS seekers, and also other qualified applicants, which is anybody who's gone through training to start a tech career. So like maybe a computer science degree, maybe another boot camp, whatever. And you're on that search for that first job. You're eligible to get free continuing education through ProTech. It's not just for NSS grads. And then sort of the next step with the Agentic AI class, because we believe all software developers who are going to have a continuing career, Agentic AI is going to be one of the tools in your tool bag, right? Whether it's get them Copilot or Claude Code or Cursor or whatever. We're all going to need to go through that learning curve. And so we're planning to open up the Agentic AI class to employers and to the rest of the community during 2026. So watch the NSS website, follow us on the socials, get on our email newsletter list. And so you can pick up the news, because we'll also be opening up some of our other new continuing ed classes to employers and to working professionals who want to learn new skills, keep advancing their careers. So on that note, anything else that we've mentioned in the podcast, we'll have links in the show notes below. I don't actually know if they are below, but it seems to be what everybody in the podcast game says. So anyways, thanks for checking out Stories from the Hackery, and check us out when we post our next podcast.